37 illegal things to never build in Minecraft. Minecraft is a game where you can technically build anything, but with that comes some guidelines on the blocks you place. So to keep your builds on the straight and narrow, pro builder Gemini Tay and I are here to let you know the misdemeanors and felonies of Minecraft building. And hey, there's a new material that's better than diamond in Minecraft. And folks, that new material is called Subscriberite. Now, it's pretty rare, but luckily TNTing that sub button down below is guaranteed to get you a full set. Plus, it's free, and it helps out a ton. Now off the bat, I'll say that having windows in your house is definitely going to be great, and it gives some much needed light to some of your builds. But when you're doing that, please just follow the basic laws of structure and don't place any windows in the corners of your room. First of all, I'm sure that comes with a litany of structural problems that the HOA would like to talk to you about, but also it's going to look so much nicer if you place those windows a little further into your walls and give them some space in a frame. Glass is a great block to use, but once you start putting it a little too close to the pillars of your builds, then that whole dirt hut might start crumbling down. If you're just going to be messing around with a creative build, then most of the time you're probably using peaceful mode. But if there's certain things in the structure that require a higher difficulty, that's fine. Just remember to turn off Enderman griefing with the game rules. Because after all, nothing's worse than seeing one of these little thieves take a crucial block from your build, and even if it's just one that's off to the side, it can still be a pain to see that eyesore. But if they're stealing a block that's got a lot more use, such as in a redstone project, then yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to say you gotta turn off Enderman griefing, otherwise the whole thing might go belly up. Because as we know, it's hard to stop the thieves when we don't have a rule prohibiting thieving. I'm sure most of you just know this one's bad from seeing it point blank. Let's be honest, when doors don't line up, then all of a sudden it's gonna make you cringe. And I don't think many of us are ever intentionally trying to do this, unless you're trying to make someone angry. But if you mess up placing down a set of double doors in your build, forget about it, and then justify that you're gonna come back and fix it later, you're not gonna come back and fix it later. Just do it then, make the doors line up, it'll look so much nicer, and then you can move on with the rest of your build.
If you're planning to decorate with trees, it's best to create your own. Using bone meal on a sapling and calling it building a tree is just plain wrong. Custom trees are the way to go. Even customizing a sapling tree is better than nothing. Your world will thank you.
If you just take the time before you've even placed a block on a build to just lay out a block palette, designating what your pillars, your fill block, what everything's gonna be, it can really level up what you're doing. Because nothing kills a building session quite like having to go out and fetch new materials. Plus, this limits the trial and error that you might have to do with some of your building choices. Because deciding that the floor color looks bad when it's just a few blocks laid out in a line is so much less of a headache than when you have to replace 900 blocks of the thing. There's a reason every pro builder starts out with one of these. It's definitely the quickest way to level up your building skills. A good build is only as good as the skeleton you place it on. And if you've ever had a problem with your build not having the right shape or not looking like how you picture it in your head, then I highly suggest starting out with a frame before you place out any other blocks. Building a frame's great, and it doesn't even require that much work. All you need is a couple of basic outlines at the start, and then from there, you can take the build in any direction you want to. But making sure to nail those fundamentals from the beginning is the difference from your build looking like an actual body, as opposed to a hunk of meat in a scrapyard. Remember, the bones are everything, folks. Alright, this one's for all the jokesters and deviants in the bunch. You see, when done properly, Build a Battle can be such a great time. But all it takes is that one person starting to make something just a little too not safe for work, and yeah, you're gonna kill the whole vibe.
Oh
nope,
boy,
all
okay,
right.
nope.
Plus, do you really want to go down in history as the person who built something a little demonetizable in Build Battle and got reported? I don't think so. And really, none of the rest of the bunch wants to report you either, it's just a bad time all around. If you gotta get those sick kicks out of your system one way or another, just do it in a single player world. And then, when you're ready to play nice with the rest of them, hop back into Build Battle. As long as you're playing by the theme, we'll all be happy to have you there.
So, you looked up a building tutorial, and then you copied it block for block, eh? Yeah, that's great for learning, but the moment you try and pass it off as your own design, you're literally plagiarizing someone else's art. Don't be that person, it's not helping you actually become better at building.
Monochrome is a style that's really only done best when played minimalistically. That's why if you've only got one block to build with, then I strongly recommend taking some time, getting a few other materials, and then using those for your build. There's a reason we only do this for building challenges. It's such a huge arm tied behind your back, and really, you don't want to take any of the tools out of your toolkit if you don't have to. Even if it's just a little bit of variation, it can go such a long way. So maybe add a few oak logs to that wood plank house. It'll definitely look a lot nicer on the block.
There is detailing, and then there is over-detailing. It's never a good idea to just completely cover your build in random stairs and slabs and call that detail. Think about what you're making and detail appropriately. A castle, for example, could have crenulations, murder holes, arrow slots, a big gate, things that make sense for a castle. Think about it.
Okay, we've all been here. When you first start playing creative mode, especially if you've been doing only survival up to that point, it can be pretty tempting to use all those hard to obtain value blocks in some of your builds. And folks, we've all seen the full diamond block house, and while it might have a high property value, it's not exactly a looker. Even when you throw in variation with all of them, they're all just such bright colors that it's really tough to justify using them in your builds, especially in survival mode. But really, unless you're balling out and using these sparingly, I can't justify using them in any of your builds. You ever build something in Minecraft that just seems a little off? Like maybe you can't place your finger on it, but that roof just doesn't seem to be doing alright there. Well, the thing is that even though Minecraft doesn't always obey to the laws of physics, you should. So unless you're going for some real abstract avant-garde roof to your house, I'm gonna have to say you should keep the overhang a little bit more supported. A few pillars do a heaping amount of help here. And really, to get that much benefit just by building a simple tower, it's worth your while to do. Whether or not you got claustrophobia, I think I can confidently say that most of us don't like feeling cramped. And saying that, I'm still surprised with how many of us are using 2-block high ceilings in our builds. Believe me, moving around one of these is just as uncomfortable as it'd be in real life, with the top of your head scraping up against the roof. People like to move in the game, they like to jump around, sprint a little bit. So open the place up a little bit, raise the roof a couple blocks, and honestly, it's gonna save a lot of damage from that poor head of yours. Just as it isn't a good idea to make a 2-block high ceiling for any of your builds, you really shouldn't be doing the minimum number of blocks to make your staircases. And sure, it might be a lot easier to do that when you're digging out of the mine. But as soon as you start to come back down to your branch mine to get those diamonds you forgot about, you are going to hit your forehead on every single block as you go down. So when you're doing a staircase, make sure to just give some breathing room. It's really going to make every time that you go up and down out of there so much faster. If you've ever played on a group creative server, then you probably have run into this guy once or twice. The type of person who just builds large, monstrous lag machines that just slug down the entire server. So folks, let me ask you to please stop being that person who just slows down everyone else's fun. And if you are that person, then atone for your sins, go to a confessional, and then tear that whole thing down. After all, those kinds of servers are for the joy of building things with others, not for waging personal wars against the owner's computer.
If you're building with a resource pack, remember to share that pack with others who are going to view your build. Otherwise, something that looks completely epic to you may look just like a silly rainbow to your friends. This is especially important on multiplayer, where you can't really control what other people are viewing your build with.
Before you start out building that perfect nether hub for you and your friends, you gotta keep something in mind, which is, as nice as it might look to use all the different blocks and wood types that you're expecting to from the overworld, don't get ahead of yourself, because that nearby ghast might just have a few things to say about that new hub. Really, if you're building in the nether, you should always use blast-resistant blocks. And hey, I get it, this is kind of limiting, but especially with the new nether update and all the new options that you have for blast-resistant choices, you should be using those kind of blocks in your palette. If you want to use flammable blocks inside of the blast-resistant shell, that's fine. As long as they're outside of the ghast fireball shooting range, I think you're in luck. I am a huge proponent about lighting up your builds, but while it's a good idea to light up, you should never be too obvious about it. What I mean by that is that lighting should be incorporated into your build. For example, glowstone isn't always a looker out in the open, but once you start hiding it behind some shrubbery or some other kind of transparent block, then you can have lighting and you don't have to see it out in the open. Plus, you can play with it to give really cool atmosphere to your builds. It's another skill entirely to be able to hide your lighting well. And it's something that I'd encourage all of you to be mindful of. Spawn-proofing your builds is a touchy subject, because after all, having too much light might kill the vibe of what you're trying to go for the atmosphere. And I get that, but even in those cases where you're incorporating darkness into the design, you should never have spawnable areas for the mobs. Especially if you're in survival mode, where each of those creepers nearby could knock away hours of work like that. But even if it's built just for creative mode, have you ever gone into someone's world download, seen a beautiful house, but inside it's just filled with a litany of creepers, skeletons, and spiders? It's not a good sight. So if the darkness is intentional, then use other kinds of blocks that don't allow mobs to spawn. That way at least you can keep both the aesthetic and your build intact. Whether it's a fireplace that goes out of hand in a wooden house, or a TNT decoration that just got a little too warm on a pirate ship. I believe that as a blanket rule, dangerous blocks don't work well for a build. Now that being said, if you're going to use them, then you should use the proper precautions to make sure that it doesn't go south. Like if you really want that fire to look just right and not spread anywhere else, then at least turn off fire tick. And if you're decorating with TNT, you should definitely keep that out of the way of any dangerous folks walking around. All it takes is a rascal with a flint and steel to light that whole thing up to high heaven. And then the only decoration you'll have is empty craters and bodies. I think this is an easy one to overlook, but when you're doing a build, you should never neglect the interior design. Look, I get it, sometimes it can come across as tedious. And building the exterior definitely takes a lot more for a first impression and the splendor of your build. But once someone looks past that wow factor and gets into the nitty-gritty of what you're actually building, going the extra mile with the little details are going to be the big small things that everyone notices. And that'll help keep your build in the upper echelon of what people see. Even just adding a few little details is going to make it look so much nicer than the competition. Man, it really turns that modern house into a modern home. For a lot of us building in survival mode, mobs are the bane of our existence. And while most of the time we try to design around not getting any creepers into the institution, I think what you also gotta keep in mind is making sure that the walls are spider-proof. Because after all, if you just have a stubby barrier that allows any spiders to crawl into your fortress, it's not much of a fortress, is it? As most of us know, any good wall needs a couple of ledges and definitely height to keep the riffraff out. And better yet, it'll look so much nicer than just having some 2-block high cover around your base.
Think about your scale. You made a house, right? A little house, just for you. It's perfect. Then, you decide to build a butterfly. And your butterfly is beautiful, but it looks like it could literally step on your house and crush it. Yeah, scale's important here.
Now anyone who's ever played around with a lot of mobs knows that having plenty of entities in a small area is going to cause a lot of lag. But the thing is, some of us are guilty of building with a lot of entities without even realizing that they're true entities. Like, I'll agree, it looks great to have your storage system with all of these different item frames. But if you've ever done one of those in actuality, then you know better than anyone else that those suckers cause so much lag in bulk. So use them a bit more sparingly, and the extra frames per second will be a definite reward.
Never spam World Edit. See that beautiful creative server that lets you use World Edit? Yeah, don't be the meanie who gets on spamming commands you know nothing about. World Edit is a great tool. Learn about it. Use it to your advantage to speed up the building process. Don't try and crash other people who are actually trying to build. Come on.
As we know, Minecraft allows for so many different great genres of build styles to be seen in full force. Whether that's medieval, sci-fi, or really anything you put your heart to. But if you're gonna put your heart to it, then maybe space out the sci-fi tower from being right next to the medieval stables. Much like those zoning laws in any kind of city, I think that you should keep those same ideas in mind. Because really, a Minecraft world is big enough to have all of these themes fully realized, you don't have to cram them into each other. So when building your city, stick to a style and don't try to mix and match, you're just gonna get too much conflict going on. If you've ever played on a server, then you know that some of the worst people to play with are the ones who treat multiplayer like they're playing on their single player world. What I mean by that is as you're building things in the world, you gotta be mindful of what other people are doing around you. So maybe don't protect your base with a lava moat if you're on a hill that pours that lava into your friend's backyard. And really, most of us play these games with our friends, so you don't want to be that kind of jerk to one of your buddies. I'm not saying kill your vision, but maybe just be a little bit more mindful. If you're doing something risky, do it away from the other builds in town. Because when you're operating as a free agent, then you could start to ruin a lot of fun, including yours if your friends start to leave. I'll admit, I love building on top of tall structures in Minecraft. But when you're doing those kinds of builds, I've got to strongly recommend building some kind of way to get up there. Because if the only way to get up to your sweet castle at the top of the mountain is only by natural parkour, nobody's gonna want to come and visit it. So really, save the pizza delivery guy some work and build some kind of easier way up into your build. That way everyone gets to enjoy it and you don't just have to Fortress of Solitude your way up there.
Planting a giant farm, eh? Maybe using World Edit, creative mode? Are you forgetting something? Water. Crops in Minecraft need water. Hydrate the soil. It makes sense. No need to have your farm going through a drought just for the sake of you using creative mode building.
Now, let me make this clear. Spawn proofing is great. Lighting up your builds, even better. But under no circumstances should you ever over-torch your builds. Now you might be wondering, when exactly do you cross that threshold into over-torching your build as opposed to just lighting it up? Well, I'm sure some of us have come across builds in the past and are maybe guilty of our own where it just definitely crosses that finish line. I think it's time to dial it back, accept that a few torches can do the trick, and maybe less is more in this case. Not maybe, less is definitely more. Do not make a torch floor, trust me. I think when messing around, some of us can start to creatively limit some of the blocks that we use. And hey, maybe that's Mojang pigeonholing us a little bit, because there is a tab specifically called building blocks. But really that's misleading, because there's so many different blocks that you can use to spice up your builds. And really what I'd say is don't be afraid to experiment with different kinds of weird blocks. Now I get it, doing this in survival might be pretty tough to do, because it's not an easy feat to just round up a whole bunch of materials and then just put them all to the test. But in creative mode, who knows? Because I've seen some great things and details that are built out of blocks I would never dream of, so don't get too stuck in your ways and try to branch out a little bit. I've definitely messed this one up once or twice. Because every now and then, I'll see my friend do one of these paths with such great block variety, making it feel natural and lived into the environment. But as soon as I start placing it all down, it looks like I threw up a double chest everywhere. You see, this is a thing to keep in mind overall, but never overdo it with the variety of blocks. Doing the odd variation here and there is going to look so much nicer than just exploding everything you've got in a couple of blocks. Play it cool, and the blocks are going to look so much better where you place them.
Never forget the small details. That path block you place down, yeah, there's probably a 1 pixel gap between that and the next block up. Replace it, otherwise it's just awkward. These little details really bring your build to the next level. Pay attention to them. Ignoring them will do you no good.
Building a house in the nether or the end is a cute idea, but as soon as you start placing a bed there, we gotta shut the whole operation down. Because even if you double right click while placing that very bed down, boom, whole place goes up in smoke, and all of a sudden it's up to your will for the loved ones. They might seem innocent, but treat these things very carefully in different dimensions. And hey, same goes for a respawn anchor in the overworld.
Don't leave your unfinished mess of a project for someone else to deal with when playing on multiplayer. If you can't finish it, allow someone else to, or take it down so they can use the land that it's on. It's just the polite thing to do.
When you're playing in survival, sometimes the economical decision can also be the most practical. Like, why use full blocks for floors when instead you can make them into half slabs and then save half of your materials for better use? Or hey, maybe you want to add some depth to your windows. Well, glass panes are great for that, and also they're going to use so much less glass, which, unless you're smelting up a whole desert's worth, can be pretty tough to come by. What I'm saying here is don't be afraid to cut corners where you can. Survival's a resources game, and if you're able to do something that doesn't harm your build's look and still makes it better for your chests, then not doing that would be a crime. Say you've made just the perfect little town for your villagers, but come nighttime, you're gonna have to have some form of defense. And torching it up can only do so much. Really, what you gotta do is you gotta build a wall around the village. And hey, who really wants a whole squad of iron golems walking around anyway? If you want your village to be populated with villagers, then make sure to keep it that way. Build a little bit of a rim, get a perimeter, and it's going to be a lot better for your town's population. And with that, big thanks to Gemini Tay, and if you want any Minecraft crimes permanently removed from your record, make sure to bail out that subscribe below. And then, have a good one, alright?